program chair, and so Lisa Garner, our president-elect, is going to come and introduce our monthly program chair. Hello, I'm so glad to be here. I hope y'all did enjoy in this wonderful weather, and you can dress really for the coldness and warm, and by the middle of the day we're fanning each other going, it's hot out here, it's hot in here. But it is a privilege for me to introduce Deanna. I can tell you, I came here 10 years ago, and we moved to Conway, and my family said, why are you moving to Conway? You do not know anyone. And I said, it's okay, it won't take me very long. The very first meeting I came to Rotary, didn't know a soul, and this lady came and said to me and said, hey, let's go do this, and she showed me the town, and I want to thank you, and that's just your heart for Rotary. And so if you have anybody new that wants to see Conway, see Deanna. She'll make sure that she finds out everything that we need to know about it. Deanna is the vice president of Regions Bank, and she was born a Hoosier in southern Indiana and then moved to Florida, Texas, Oklahoma City, and then Arkansas. She said it's sad to leave one state in confusion and whether to root for the Indiana, the Miami Dolphins, the Cowboys, OU, or the Razorbacks, and of course UCA Bears, which always makes for a fabulous t-shirt collection. I can only imagine. She started her banking career in 1979 as a receptionist for a lender, an IRA retirement specialist, district manager, loan training coordinator, business development officer, and branch manager. Still the same philosophy stands. People bank with people. This mission statement to herself has carried through her 37-year banking career, where she is currently a vice president for Regions Bank and proud to be part of such a successful team, improving the financial lives for her customers. When you're in business helping people, the nonprofit groups are the best blessings. Deanna has been fortunate to be involved in the following organizations: the Conway Area Chamber of Commerce Ambassador, Paint the Town Purple Chair and Women in Business, Conway Regional Health Foundation Women's Council Steering Committee President, Dazzle Day Sponsorship Chair, and Social Media Chair, the American Red Cross Board, Resource Development Chair, Vice President Sponsor Chair, Area President for 5 local counties, including Faulkner County Long-Term Recovery Board, and the Conway Noon Rotary Board. Thank you so much. That's a lot of words. On a personal note, she was an only child growing up in a very musical family and played the bass guitar and the piano for her parents' country music band called Country Days. Country music seemed to be her escape for life. Then it came back around several years later when she married Jay Runyon, aka JR My Country Y107. He was the general manager for our local Conway station and music programmer for all 9 Crane Media stations. She actually did his ribbon cutting as a chamber ambassador in August of 2005, and there is proof in the photo that she was indeed there. However, they didn't actually meet until several years later at a local Conway event. They have 3 children, Pierce Norwine, 21, and Camden Norwine, 15, both Conway football Wampus Cats, and a daughter, Haley Runyon, who is 19 and lives in Missouri, and proud to say she is on the dean's list as a freshman at Stevens College. Deanna's best accomplishments in life, however, would be her 2 boys, who always put their mom first in any situation, but always make sure she has a Starbucks coffee in hand. Welcome, Deanna Runyon.
That's a long list. That wears me out. Just listening to her read that. That's what happens when you're old. Don't say anything. Okay, so I was trying to calculate last night how long that I have known our speaker today. And it's really about 15 years. I've known Mr. Brad Lacy and privileged to work with him at various chamber events. And I've learned a lot through the chamber. And it teaches you a lot about Conway and teaches you a lot about our city. So I want to personally thank you for agreeing to do this today. And we're going to give a little bit of history about our speaker. Brad Lacy is a native of Ida, Arkansas, and began his economic development career in 1997 with the Arkansas Economic Development Commission as a community development consultant and later as a project manager, where he worked to recruit companies to the state. Brad has served as the president and CEO of the Conway Development Corporation, CDC, the City of Conway's nonprofit economic development entity since 2000. In December of 2006, Brad became president and CEO of the Conway Area Chamber of Commerce It marked the very first time in nearly 2 decades that the Chamber and CDC have been under the leadership of the same person. I don't know about you all, but I remember the day that was not the case. I mean, we had several different directors at the Chamber. Some of you are nodding your heads, you go way back. I think it's fair to say that Brad has single-handedly turned this city around with this. You've done a very good job, and we appreciate you, Brad. The combined management of both organizations brings the city a larger staff to focus on economic development activities. In 2003, the Conway Area Chamber of Commerce was named the Chamber of the Year by the American Chamber of Commerce Executives. That is a huge honor. I don't know where Amy Reed is, but we were hooping and hollering over that one, weren't we, Amy? That was awesome. He holds a bachelor's degree in geography from the University of Central Arkansas and a master's in public administration from the University of Arkansas Little Rock. He is a graduate of the Community Development Institute at UCA, the Economic Development Institute at the University of Oklahoma, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute for Organization Management. He is a member of Conway's Second Baptist Church, where he's active in the worship choir ministry. Who's heard him sing? This guy can sing. We should have had you sing today. That would have been awesome. I'll have to come sing at Baptist. He is the past chairman of the University of Arkansas Board of Trustees and sits on the board of directors. Central Arkansas. Did I say Central Arkansas? I'm sorry. Oh, that's bad. Tom's not here. Sorry. I'm just glad Tom's not here. And sits on the board of directors of the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives and the Board of Regents for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce West Institute of Organization Management. Please welcome Brad Lacy.
Well, Deanna is one of those people that I cannot say no to. I don't know if there are other people in the room that feel that way, but if Deanna asks me to do something, I'll do it. So first, let me tell you a little bit more about Ed. We are always looking at new opportunities at the Chamber. Lindsay Henderson, who you know, was our Chief Operating Officer, and I asked her to take a new role in the fall. It's a newly created position, Chief Revenue Officer. So if you see Lindsay coming, she's going to ask you for some money. So I'm giving you fair warning. And so that left an opening, and it was really interesting. As soon as I heard from Lindsay that she was going to accept the new role, I immediately started thinking about, well, how do I fill her shoes? And randomly, Ed Facebooks me from Orange County and says, my wife and I are thinking about moving home. I would like to talk to you about what the job market looks like out there. And what you don't know about Ed is that he has chamber experience. So he worked for the Little Rock Chamber several years ago, moved out to Orange County, worked for the Irvine Chamber, created a young professionals organization that he managed, and just a really impressive guy. And so it was lucky for us that he wanted to move back to Conway. And so I didn't talk to him about job opportunities in Central Arkansas. I just said, hey, do you want this job at the Chamber? Because it was a great fit. So I think not only is Ed a Rotarian, but his wife is a Rotarian. So you can thank the Chamber for recruiting 2 new Rotarians. We're excited about that. Let me see if I can say this word and then see if anyone knows what it means. Quasquicentennial. Does anyone know what that means? Yeah, sesquicentennial, we all know, if we were around in 1986, I was in junior high and it was Arkansas's 150th birthday, and we all learned to sing Arkansas, You Run Deep in Me, and do all that, because that was sesquicentennial. Quasquicentennial is 125. And 2016 marks the 125th anniversary of the Chamber. And so you will see us roll out a series of, I think, fun and interesting events this year that recognize 125 years of a business organization that has largely been involved in every big thing that's happened in the community. We had an intern last semester that I put in the basement of the log cabin looking at old papers to just see some of that historical information that was out there, and it is really impressive. You know, going back to the early days, you know, we exist really because of Hendrix. You know, Captain Martin was a leader in an effort to get Hendrix here, and through that he decided that we needed a formalized business organization. And so Hendrix will celebrate 125 years just like we will, which is pretty interesting, and we both do that at the same time. And we exist really for that reason. You know, he wanted to formalize that group. He called it the Conway Board of Trade, and that was our name for a number of years. And really, our reason for being was to recruit more schools here. And when you read through the historical information about the Chamber, it's just interesting what the business community decided to do at different times, whether it be find the money to make Lake Conway a reality, you know, run the Toadsuck Ferry for a number of years. And you just go, you know, through the years, and there was almost nothing of major consequence that happened in Conway that the Chamber wasn't involved in. And I think that's the beauty of organizations like this. You know, our national organization, ACCE, one of the employees spent about 3 years doing research on chambers, and he wrote a book called The Magicians of Main Street. And our story in Conway is really no different than stories of chambers across the United States. I mean, the truth of the matter is, chambers do the things that people think just happen. I mean, in almost any community in America, chambers were the organization that created economic opportunity for people. And it should be that way, because it is, you know, it is a coalition of businesses who have a like interest, and that is to grow the economy. And so, as I always tell people, you know, whether you're investing $200 with us a year or $20,000 a year with us, that money is going to grow this economy in a variety of ways, or do big projects that may impact the quality of life of the community, that ultimately will impact your ability to be competitive. And I'm going to get into some of that today. So this year is a big year for us, and we are really excited about it. And you know, we're going to do some cool things to honor our past chairs. We're going to do some cool things to honor our past presidents, like Lloyd. We're going to do an interesting look at the dues structure of the Chamber. So if you look back, it appears that we did not charge dues until 1946. So maybe those first few years were voluntary. Maybe they collected money when they needed it for specific things. But in 1946, they started assessing dues. And we have, I think, 18 businesses who have paid dues since 1946. Have never missed a year. You know, Smith Ford being one, Conway Corporation being one. And we're going to do some really great things for those companies. Because if you think about that, every year you have to make a decision on whether you write that check or not. And we know that. And to have done it for 60 years, it's pretty remarkable. So, you know, we're going to take this year to celebrate And I don't think that we probably do that enough, and I'm not just speaking of the chamber. I think we in general as people probably don't celebrate those milestones or those accomplishments enough. And in Conway, there's a lot to celebrate, and there's a very rich history here of the business community doing big things that ultimately impact everybody. So, quasquicentennial is a word you will hear. It's a word we will all butcher, I'm sure. But hopefully 12 months from now, we'll know it, and then it won't be relevant anymore. So we'll keep moving on. So today, just to give you a little sort of update, I think, on where we are, a state of the economy, for instance. The biggest unknown, obviously, for us is energy. What is known is that prices are down, jobs are down. We can hope for a super cold winter and a super hot summer. Those would be probably two of the best things that would happen to the natural gas industry here. But when you start digging into some of the data, and this has always been the thing that is interesting to me about Conway, is the resiliency of this local economy. And it has to do, I think, really with the diversity of it. I mean, Faulkner County's economy is very diverse. It's not dependent on one specific industry sector. So, if you were to look back at the first quarter of 2012 and compare it to the newest data we have is the second quarter of 2015. So there's not quite a 3-year time there. Well, no, that's 3 years, 3.5. The natural resources and mining sector of the economy, which would include a lot of the natural gas industry, but not all of it. In the first quarter of 2012, there were 1,852 people employed in that sector. By the second quarter of 2015, that had reduced to 930. So almost 1,000 jobs gone in that one sector in 3.5 years. The bad news is the payroll of those jobs is tremendous. I mean, you're losing very, very high paying jobs that lead, they lead the market in average hourly wage. But what's interesting is where we make those up. So if you go to a sector called business and professional services, or professional and business services, it's one of the two, and you look at that same time period in the first quarter of 2012, there were 5,918 people employed in that sector. By the second quarter of 2015, that number was 6,122, which doesn't sound that impressive maybe because that's a net increase of about 200 jobs. But there was something that happened in that time period that really makes it pretty impressive to me, and that was HP did a layoff that impacted 500 people. So in that time period, we lost 500 jobs in that sector and replaced them, and then added another 200 more. So that is pretty robust job growth in one sector. I mean, that's 700 jobs that were created in that one sector that still ended up with a net increase. The shining star for us is really education and health services, and I want to explain that. That is private education. Public education like UCA is going to show up in state government jobs in our information. So education and health services went from 5,700 to 6,300 jobs in that same time period. So almost 600 net new jobs. So as we've lost jobs in natural resources and mining, we're replacing them in other sectors. Obviously, I think we would all hope at some point that drilling picks up again. We have never had that as a sector of our economy until now, and the only thing we knew was the ramp up. We've never gone through the cycle on the other side where it goes down, and now we're going through that cycle to know what that feels like. If we were in Midland or Odessa, Texas, we would have been through it multiple times, or Oklahoma City or any of those other places. And those other places are going through it just like we are. I would argue that we're probably a little bit better prepared than some places just because of the diversity that's there. So interesting, we're continuing to grow. We saw new announcements last year from companies like Matova, Big Cloud Analytics, Analyze. I mean, we're continuing to see growth in those white-collar companies that come here to access the talent pool that is coming out of the 3 institutions of higher education. I don't foresee that changing at all. I mean, that's really what your competitive advantage is. And I think communities make mistakes if they think they can be everything to everybody. I mean, we have natural advantages that other people don't have, and it is the talent issue. You know, we have a lot of young, smart kids that get out of college, and some of them want to stay here. And so if we can keep them here, that's a pretty good measure of success. Retail sales have been really strong in 2015. This is some old data. This was January to August. We were up about 4%. I know the October numbers came in. They were up 5, maybe almost 6%. So you still got 2 months left that lag. That report comes in a little bit later. So anecdotally, what I heard from everybody from big box retailers locally to small businesses in December was that they had a really great month. You know, so I'm hoping that holds together, and that you'll have a really solid year of maybe an increase in sales tax of 5 or maybe 5%. And this is what I would say about that. There's a message there too, because there's nothing big that's driving that. It's not like there's a new store that came in that suddenly popped another $20 million of sales into the market. I mean, that's sort of organic growth with the retailers that we have now. In the next 24 months, I think you're going to see that go way up because of all the new retail that's coming in. But this growth is just really organic growth that's pretty healthy. Current projects that we see that we're working on, IT, we have an interesting kind of logistics project out there. A couple of them, in fact. One is more kind of traditional warehousing. The other one is the white collar side of logistics, which is an interesting one. The IT stuff is still active for us. Healthcare, obviously that's going to be a big story in the next few years. You know, Baptist will open this year. You may have read that the CDC is very close to, well, we're in final negotiations with them. Behavioral Health Hospital is coming to Conway. They're buying property from us in the southern part of the city in the technology park. There was a little 9-acre tract attached to our technology park that doesn't really feel like it's a part of the park itself. It's always just sort of been down sort of by itself. They approached us. They had done most of their due diligence and came into the office one day. I mean, you wish you had 3 of these a year. They come into the office one day and they just said, hey, we've looked all around Conway. We know everything we need to know. We want this piece of property, and we know that you own it. And so, you know, that's probably a $30 to $35 million project when it's done. It's 80 beds. It's 150 to 200 full-time healthcare employees. So significant economic impact on the community. And frankly, from what we understand, there is a severe shortage of those beds in the state of Arkansas. I mean, not just in Conway market or Central Arkansas market. It's just a problem across the state. And so that'll bring 80 beds of behavioral health into this market and really solidify our place as a regional healthcare destination. We're seeing a trend in site selection that I think is important to mention, because it may change the way we do some things. It may not. but there is increasingly more emphasis put on amenity-based decisions for companies. So, I'll read you a description of an RFP that we responded to back in September. And I want you to pay attention really to the end of this. It says the company will consider both existing Class A and Class B office space as well as build a suit. The company prefers an open space floor plan and does not wish to be in an industrial setting. Though not strictly required, and this is the part I want you to listen to, though not strictly required, location benefits could include proximity to amenities such as restaurants, entertainment, and quality of life features within walking distance. So we are seeing more and more of those companies specify that in the initial request for information, which says to me that they want to be in a downtown setting or they want to be in a Hendricks Village setting. They do not want their employees to get in a car and drive somewhere for lunch. They believe it is a competitive advantage when they recruit talent, that the environment makes a difference. And so we are seeing more of that. We're seeing more of that specified on the front end. And then that takes us really to a challenge that we have in the community is we have a severe lack of office space. There is no real office space. There is no office market here. I will just say it that way. No one's building speculative office. Historically, they haven't. Now, what's interesting is you see Dr. Thomas building a 45,000 square foot office building by the new hospital. When he originally began to build it, he was referring to it as medical office. Well, now he sees it differently based on some of the stuff we've been able to visit with him about. And if he gets a medical office user, obviously he's going to take it, but I think he's seeing it now as, it's an office building, and we need office buildings. And so that can provide a really good solution for us. Southwestern Energy has consolidated from 4 floors onto 2.5 floors. So they have a 1.5 floors of office space that they put on the market. We've already showed it once to a company that I think is a really good fit that could potentially take all of it, which would again leave us with no office space. So we would be back to where we started. But my hope is over time that that somebody figures out that there is a need for office space. I don't know that we need more warehouse space. I don't know that we need, maybe some other types of development, but we definitely need office space. We also have a lack of housing options in the core part of downtown for young professionals. I think that is a real negative for us because it gets back to what we've talked about with recruiting. There is a group of people who would prefer to live in an environment like that, and we don't have it available. And it may seem hard to believe that somebody would not make a decision or would make a decision not to do a project here because of that. But I had a conversation yesterday afternoon with a tech company who was concerned about that. They were concerned about a lack of downtown housing because they view it as a recruitment issue for them, because the person that they want to work for them probably wants to live there. And so you may say, well, big deal. Well, the big deal is they may go to Fayetteville, And so I don't know how many times we lose these things until we, figure out what to do. And I'm putting myself in that category. It's my job to try to help figure out what to do with that. But we are losing business because we're missing some amenities that are not here. And it's unfortunate because I know that the market's here. Hit on one more thing and then I'll open it up to some questions. I know the big question probably in the group is going to be what's going on with Central Landing. I've said before, I use the Mark Twain quote, "The reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated," to describe what I feel about Central Landing. You know, there are rumors in the community that Dillard's has pulled out. There are rumors, I mean, there's all kinds of rumors in the community, and that is not true. We continue to work with the Wilsons on this. You know, I finally had heard so much of it that I got the Wilsons to write a letter stating their position. We are still working with them. We're still working with the city on infrastructure. You know, as of, I think, the week before Christmas, they were still trying to get property acquired for Central Landing Boulevard. And with any of the retailers, they're not going to start construction until they know that all of the pieces of that infrastructure, specifically the roads, are not finished, but they know they're going to be built. So, I mean, if there's a question, it makes it very hard to sign on someone to lease if there's a question about whether or not the roads are going to be finished, because retail's harder to recruit today than it's ever been, and I've said this publicly before, we are fortunate that Dillard's is headquartered in Little Rock, because there are very few department store deals that are going on anywhere in America. You know, Macy's is closing 30 or 40 stores. You just don't see deals being made anymore because retail has changed. And, you know, how many, and this is a question, how many of you ordered something at Christmas online? That's the biggest change in retail, is that we're ordering more online. And so that traditional development is harder to do, but I think it's going to get done. I think you'll start to see work on it this year. So Dillard's is in, the deal is on. Don't believe the hype, and I'll open it up for questions. Yes, sir.
Hey, Brad, what about the status of the old Newport building? Has any activity been?
Yeah, the lead activity is really good. In fact, we have a couple of people right now that are really zeroed in on it. One is very close. There's a gap we have to close, but it's, the gap's getting smaller. You know, the building is huge and the property is huge. I mean, there's 130 acres there, and so sometimes often it's overkill for somebody. You know, Nucor assesses value to the property as much as they assess value to the building. Well, if you don't need the property, if you don't need all the property, then it's really of no value to you and you're still paying for it. But we're as close as we've ever been on a project, so I'm hopeful with it. Yes, sir.
What's the single greatest challenge you see facing Conway right now?
I would say that we cannot lose momentum in doing what we've done the past 10 to 15 years. So I go back to what I've said about amenity-based development. The city, and I applaud city government in a lot of the vision that they've had, but the trail system, superior parks, cycling, taking care of cyclists, the money that's been invested in downtown, all of those things are really important. And it's important that we continue down that pathway, because you're constantly competing against communities that are upping their game too. You know, I mean, unless something changes, we're never going to have the Walton Foundation give us $100 million to do anything. So we're going to have to do it the hard way, or I mean, it's easy to do it if the money's there. But I think that's our biggest challenge, is that we have to keep ourselves competitive, and that involves the things like the downtown housing. It involves more retail. It involves different types of housing. It involves more amenities. If we ever fall behind on that, we're going to lose, because the communities that we compete against, they're not stopping. I mean, they won't. You know, we need more support for startups. we don't have a person who is dedicated to sort of fostering that startup culture here. And you look at Northwest Arkansas and Little Rock, and they do. And so there are times, I mean, you can look right now at some very successful startups in Little Rock, and they're Conway kids that are doing it. And so that is not good for us. You know, I mean, so there are some things that do concern me, and those are them. Finn?
Yes, can you talk just a tiny bit about public transportation? We see ourselves spanning multiple areas now, and is there a thought that we might be having more public transportation between Green City?
That's a toughie.
Yes.
That's, you know, it's hard to do financially. You know, I will say this, as crazy as this is going to sound, there are 3 or 4 people in the community right now that are talking about driverless cars as the solution to public transportation. And while it sounds crazy, it's happening. And the people who are involved in that discussion, I mean, Google is pushing it, and the people who are having the discussion have actually had an audience with Google on more than one occasion, and there is some interest, because if those things work, you know, it's got to work in a place like this before it works in a place like Palo Alto or Ann Arbor. I mean, if it works in a place like Conway, then it's going to work everywhere. And so, as crazy as that may sound, I'm not too sure that might not be our solution to some public transportation issues.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Brad, for sharing about what's going on in the city, and County Judge Jim Baker will be here next week to talk about some things going on in Faulkner County. I want to thank